For decades, experts believe Cahokia's founders were a small local group who built a city of earth and wood, isolated on the Mississippi. But DNA evidence is overturning that story. Genetic markers from human remains point to migrants converging from far-flung corners of North America. This breakthrough challenges everything we thought we knew about America's first metropolis and raises a troubling question. If Cahokia wasn't built by locals alone, who really made this city possible? At the turn of the 11th century, the landscape around the Mississippi River began to change in ways no one could have predicted. A settlement that had lingered for generations, modest, scattered, little more than a village, suddenly transformed. By 1050 CE, something extraordinary was underway. The city we now call Cahokia exploded in size, outpacing every other settlement north of Mexico. Population estimates leap from a few hundred to tens of thousands in the span of just a few decades. Some archaeologists put the number at over 10,000. Others, looking at the sprawl of house foundations and the scale of the earthworks, argue for as many as 40,000 people living within 6 square miles. At its peak, Cahokia rivaled the largest cities in medieval Europe, bigger than London or Paris at the same time. Kristen Hedman, an expert in physical anthropology, has spent years studying the remains and artifacts left behind. She describes the city as a place buzzing with activity, its neighborhoods packed with houses clustered around courtyards, each one built by hand. The evidence is everywhere. Layers of packed earth, broken pottery, animal bones, corn cobs mixed into mound fill. These traces tell a story of a society that was not only large but highly organized, able to marshal the labor and resources needed to reshape the land itself. The numbers alone are staggering. Over 120 massive mounds rise from the floodplain, dominated by Monk's Mound, a 4-terraced platform larger than any pyramid north of Mesoamerica, soaring 100 feet above the ground. Surrounding it, vast plazas and wooden palisades stretch out in all directions. Such monumental construction would have required thousands of workers, careful planning, and a steady supply of food. Maize agriculture, boosted by a warmer medieval climate, supported this surge, but the sheer scale of the city raises new questions. Where did all these people come from? How did they arrive so quickly, and what drew them here? The demographic Big Bang at Cahokia stands out as one of the most dramatic urban growth events in ancient North America. The city's population did not simply rise, it skyrocketed, reaching a scale that demands explanation. This sudden mass of humanity became a puzzle for generations of researchers. The answers, it turns out, would come not just from the ground, but from the genetic code preserved in the bones of Cahokia's earliest residents. Rising from the heart of the Mississippi floodplain, Monk's Mound dominates the Cahokia landscape. At 100 feet tall and spreading across 14 acres, it eclipses any other prehistoric earthwork in North America. The mound's 4 terraces, stacked layer upon layer, required an estimated 22 million cubic feet of earth, hauled basket by basket, packed by hand, and shaped with remarkable precision. Surrounding this monumental platform, more than 120 earthen mounds form a complex city plan. Some served as burial sites, others as platforms for temples or elite residences. At ground level, an 80-acre plaza unfolds, a space large enough to hold thousands of people, ringed by neighborhoods, ceremonial posts, and wooden palisades. The scale of these projects defies easy explanation. Archaeologists have calculated that building Monk's Mound alone would have taken thousands of workers, laboring for years. Each mound demanded not just raw effort, but careful coordination, teams to dig, carry, shape, and manage the flow of materials. The wood henge, a circle of massive red cedar posts aligned to the solstices and equinoxes, required both engineering skill and astronomical knowledge. Every post, some over 20 feet tall, had to be transported from distant forests, then set precisely in place to mark the turning points of the year. The logistics behind these achievements point to a tightly organized society. Food, tools, and shelter had to be provided for a workforce on this scale. Someone had to plan the sequence of construction, allocate resources, and enforce schedules. The presence of so many mounds, each with its own function and design, suggests layers of leadership, specialized roles, and a system for mobilizing people far beyond the demands of daily survival. What drove thousands to commit to such projects? The answer lies not only in the city's ambition, but in its ability to attract and sustain a population large enough to make the impossible seem routine. The evidence of monumental labor raises a new question. How did Cahokia gather the hands, the knowledge, and the will to build a city on this scale? The search for answers draws us deeper into the city's origins and toward the clues hidden in the bones of its earliest residents. Inside a modern lab, the work begins long before any DNA sequence appears on a computer screen. Researchers suit up in full-body gowns, double gloves, and face masks. Every surface gleams under bright lights. Ancient bones and teeth from Cahokia, some over 1,000 years old, are handled with the kind of caution usually reserved for priceless artifacts. The risk of contamination, modern DNA mixing with ancient, hangs over every step. Pipette tips are swapped out for each sample. Even the air is filtered, and tools are sterilized between every use. A technician lifts a tooth from a sealed bag, placing it in an extraction chamber. The outer layer is carefully sanded away, exposing the inner dentin where ancient DNA is most likely to survive. Each fragment is weighed, then ground to a fine powder. This powder is treated with chemicals that dissolve the mineral matrix, releasing whatever genetic material remains. The solution is spun in a centrifuge, then run through a series of purification columns, each step designed to isolate DNA molecules that have endured centuries underground. The next phase is library preparation. Here, DNA fragments are tagged with short adapters, allowing them to be recognized and copied by sequencing machines. Every action is deliberate. Gloves are changed constantly. Workstations are wiped down with bleach and UV light. Negative controls, tubes with no bone or tooth, run alongside every batch, acting as sentinels against invisible mistakes. Any trace of modern DNA, even a single stray cell, could ruin the results. Before sequencing, scientists check the DNA for characteristic signs of age. Damage plots are generated, looking for the telltale pattern of cytosine to thymine changes at the ends of fragments, a molecular signature that marks the DNA as genuinely ancient. Only samples that pass these tests move forward. The rest are set aside, their data considered unreliable. Once the libraries are ready, the samples are loaded onto a high-throughput sequencer. Over the next several days, machines read millions of fragments, translating chemical signals into digital code. The raw data is then compared against reference genomes, searching for patterns that might reveal maternal lineages, population mixing, or distant origins. Every finding is double-checked. If a sample shows unexpected results, an unusual haplogroup, or a possible contaminant, the process is repeated, sometimes from scratch. These painstaking protocols aren't just about scientific pride. They are the foundation for every claim that will follow. Without this rigor, the story of Cahokia's population, who came, who stayed, and who built the city's monumental earthworks, would remain buried in speculation. Instead, the lab's discipline transforms ancient remains into evidence, clearing the way for a new understanding of North America's first city. A single tooth can hold the memory of a childhood spent hundreds of miles from Cahokia. When researchers examined 87 teeth from ancient burials, they were not just looking for age or diet, they were searching for the chemical fingerprint of home. Strontium isotopes, absorbed from local water and soil during childhood, remain locked in tooth enamel for life. By comparing these ratios to the geology of North America, scientists mapped out where each person had grown up. The results were startling. Roughly 1 in 5 individuals buried at Cahokia had spent their early years far beyond the city's shadow. Their strontium signatures matched the bedrock of distant places, the limestone plains to the north, the shell-rich soils of the Gulf Coast, and the ancient glacial deposits near the Great Lakes. This was not a city built by a single insular community. It was a gathering point, a magnet for people from across the continent. The The DNA told a similar story. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA, which traces maternal ancestry, revealed a patchwork of lineages. 5 distinct Native American haplogroups appeared in the sample, far more variety than expected for a population that had grown in place. These genetic markers, paired with the strontium data, painted a picture of a city teeming with newcomers. Some of the most prominent burials, including those of elite individuals, showed origins in the southeastern Mississippi Valley, a region hundreds of miles away. Others carried genetic ties to the plains or the woodlands beyond the river's reach. The numbers alone upend old assumptions. For decades, many believed Cahokia's rise could be explained by local families growing larger, or by the slow absorption of neighboring villages. The evidence now points elsewhere. At least 20% of those tested had not been born in the region. Their presence was not an anomaly, it was a defining feature of the city's population. This influx of people brought new skills, beliefs, and connections, fueling the explosive growth that transformed Cahokia into an urban powerhouse. The city's rapid expansion, so visible in its monumental mounds and sprawling neighborhoods, depended on a constant flow of migrants. Each arrival added to the city's diversity, reshaping its culture and its destiny. The investigation into Cahokia's origins no longer points to a single founding group. Instead, it reveals a crossroads, a place where people from distant landscapes came together, drawn by opportunity, ceremony, or the promise of something greater. This mixing of backgrounds is written in the bones and teeth left behind. The city's story is not one of isolation, but of movement and integration, with genetic evidence offering proof that the builders of Cahokia came from many worlds to create something entirely new. Copper glints from burial caches, its chemical fingerprint tracing a path back to the ancient mines of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Cahokia's artisans hammered this metal into ornaments and tools, each piece a testament to connections stretching hundreds of miles. Alongside the copper, marine shells appear in ceremonial deposits, species native only to the Gulf Coast, over 500 miles to the south. Mica, a glittering mineral, arrives from the Appalachian highlands, its layered sheets carefully cut and shaped for ritual use. These materials did not drift in by accident. Archaeologists have mapped their origins using provenance chemistry, a method that compares the elemental makeup of artifacts to known geological sources. The copper's isotopic signature matches deposits around Lake Superior, while the shell's mineral content mirrors the warm waters of the Gulf. Even the mica's trace elements point squarely to outcrops in the eastern mountains. Timothy Pocketat, whose work on Cahokia's rise has reshaped the field, describes the city as an economic magnet. He points to the sheer variety of imported goods as proof that Cahokia was more than a local hub, it was the center of a continent-wide exchange. Pottery styles from distant river valleys, stone tools from the Ozarks, and obsidian from the Rockies all converge in the archaeological record. Each object hints at the journeys of traders, pilgrims, and migrants who moved along the river, corridors, and forest trails that crisscrossed the eastern woodlands. The scale of this trade was unprecedented north of Mexico. Moving copper from Michigan to Illinois required not just knowledge of the landscape, but the ability to negotiate alliances, organize expeditions, and maintain safe passage through unfamiliar territory. The presence of such far-flung materials at Cahokia suggests a society with both the ambition and the logistical reach to draw in resources and people from every direction. These networks, mapped through artifact sourcing, reveal a city plugged into the currents of a much larger world. The flow of goods set the stage for economic power, but also for the mixing of cultures, ideas, and genetic lineages that would define Cahokia's population. Wooden palisades once enclosed the heart of Cahokia, their sharpened posts standing shoulder to shoulder in the earth. This was no simple fence. The palisade carved a boundary between the sacred and the everyday, separating the grand plazas and mounds from the neighborhoods that sprawled beyond. Inside, the city's rulers and priests orchestrated ceremony and governance, shielded by walls that both protected and proclaimed their authority. The Palisades' ditches and bastions reveal a society alert to threats, real or imagined, and determined to control access to its most powerful spaces. Within these walls, hierarchy took physical shape. The largest mounds, including Monk's Mound, served as platforms for elite residences and temples. At their feet, smaller mounds and plazas radiated outward, each one part of a carefully ordered plan. Archaeologists have uncovered burials filled with exotic goods, copper ornaments from distant mines, marine shells carried from the Gulf Coast, and sheets of mica from the Appalachians. These treasures cluster with high-status individuals, their graves set apart from the common dead. The distribution of such grave goods draws an unmistakable line between those who wielded power and those who labored below. Ritual and timekeeping anchored this order. Just west of Monk's Mound, a ring of massive cedar posts, known as Woodhenge, once stood in the open ground. Each post aligned with the rising sun on solstice and equinox mornings, transforming the city's calendar into a public spectacle. At dawn, crowds would gather to watch the sun crest over the horizon, its light threading between the posts to mark the turning of the seasons. These ceremonies reinforced the authority of Cahokia's leaders, who claimed to mediate between the people and the cosmos. Timothy Pocketat describes this arrangement as nothing less than a managed state. Diverse peoples drawn from far-flung regions found themselves woven into a new social fabric. Their roles, rites, and rituals were shaped by the city's physical boundaries and ceremonial routines. In this landscape of mounds, palisades, and solar markers, the foundations of power and belonging were built not just from earth and timber, but from the lives and loyalties of Cahokia's many newcomers. Today, as ancient DNA reshapes our view of Cahokia, one fact stands out. The roots of America's first great city lie in diversity and movement, not isolation. In an era when migration again defines national debate, Cahokia's story reminds us that cultural complexity and change are ancient forces. The past isn't fixed. Every new discovery rewrites who we are. What story will the next breakthrough tell?